What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at the question, really, about what is the future for The Elder Scrolls Online, which is a video that, to be honest, I'm not expecting to do very well for a variety of reasons, but as we'll get into, this one is just something I couldn't quite shake out of the back of my head, and so I decided to just make the video and be done with it. Now, this video is going to cover a few different things, and so I'm going to divide it up a little bit. First, I'm going to talk about why I'm making this video, then we're going to talk about what has happened as objectively as possible, and then the last half of it's going to be some speculation and stuff on my end. But to give a brief setup, recently, ZeniMax Online Studios has been the subject of numerous layoffs, and that has very much called into question, what is the future of this game at this point? Is it being sunset, maintained, maintenance mode, whatever you want to call it, what is happening here? And that's just one of those things that, again, I couldn't get out of my head, but why is that? Well, if you've been around the channel an extremely long time, you may well remember that I used to cover ESO a lot. That is because I have played ESO a lot. Too much, actually. Perhaps a not uncommon story. Right after my son was born in 2019, the company I was at gave me some paternity leave, and it was pretty much during kind of that period of my life that I was like, oh, I just can't play these games anymore. They demand too much of my time. You obviously can't pause them to go take care of other stuff, which was much more of a necessity at that point, as you would imagine. And that, alongside a few other things that I don't want to derail this video with, it just kind of dawned on me that I just wasn't going to be able to play MMOs anymore. Not in any great detail anyway. But I've often said that I really enjoy the Elder Scrolls franchise as a whole, and the Elder Scrolls Online is included in that. And while I don't really love the MMO aspects of it, and we could go on and on about, what I do and don't like about this thing, ultimately, before that happened, I just played a ton of ESO. And that, combined with my general interest in the IP, all of this recent news just had me thinking about this game, especially since we very recently got this big updated roadmap that is supposed to be what is in store for ESO going forward. However, while that roadmap is nice, I also don't think what they said actually addresses the main concern people had, which was that this game is being sunset in some way or simply being maintained. Because as I'm hoping to go over once we get to that point, while what they've put out does show that they still have things planned with the staff they have left and everything, it also, again, just doesn't actually discredit anything people have been speculating up to this point, because two things can be true at the exact same time. What they've said and what people are worried about are not mutually exclusive things. But in order to explain that, I should probably explain the crux of the situation first before we get too far into that. So let's talk about just what is happening here. Now, the layoffs are not news at all at this point. Most of that happened at the beginning of July. It is now the start of August. But in the recent mass of Xbox layoffs, with still yet more to come, by the way, I feel like people are forgetting about that part already. ZeniMax Online Studios got hit particularly hard. I don't see the exact numbers anywhere, and I doubt they would give the exact numbers, but anywhere from half to 2/3 of their studio got laid off, and so the team is already much, much smaller than it was. But the catch is, people also might not remember at this point, there were also more layoffs last year across Microsoft, and then the other MMO that ZeniMax Online Studios was working on got outright canceled. So there's been a significant amount of movement at that studio in the past year or so in terms of projects and things being worked on. The canceled project, Project Blackbird, we don't really have too many details on, other than a lot of people were really enjoying what they had so far, but, doesn't do us a lot of good here in the present day. Now, a few days ago, the main reason this has been on my mind, however, following all of these layoffs, we got a sort of official update from the new game director, and I do say new because the studio is now being co-led by two people, it would seem, a Nick G and Josh Henderson. The crux of this update, which will be linked down below, is basically that obviously they've lost a lot of staff, however they still plan on moving forward and rolling out content, but some of that is going to be delayed as a result of those layoffs at the very least. This means that in what's left of 2026, they are rolling out Update 51 a week later on September 28th. That will include a bunch of new content. On October 21st, the second season will drop, and we'll get into seasons just in a moment, by the way, which will feature a lot of changes of its own. And then for 2027, while they're still finalizing plans there, a few things are confirmed. The new trial, Crimson Velt, Update 52 has been moved to January. In particular, that was initially planned for 2026 from what I understand. And then they're also planning to refresh some of the class and overall combat stuff in 2027 as well. But that seems to be more of a target than a finalized plan. So all in all, that's kind of what we know, what has happened, and what has been confirmed, I guess you could say. Everything past this is just pure opinion and my own general thoughts on the matter. So I think it's worth mentioning straight away, these new season systems, that's not how this used to work. So The Elder Scrolls Online has been through some different models over the course of its lifespan. It used to have a subscription outright, now it is actually buy to play, like you buy the expansions and then the ongoing stuff is free, but it's monetized of course via like the shop. In particular, I find the craft bag to be frustrating. And then while you would buy the expansions and stuff, they would also put out content throughout the year in the form of their chapters, which was usually like their main expansion for the year, followed by a dungeon DLC, a smaller content update, and then a second dungeon DLC a lot of the time. At least as far as I recall, that is. However, starting in, I believe it was the beginning of this year actually, they officially transitioned to the new seasonal system, which is basically just smaller but more frequent updates. So rather than big expansions that would bring like new land masses and everything to the game, these seasons by default, which were already a thing long before all of these layoffs happened, would include some new story content, events, dungeons, etc. that would basically break it up into more frequent, smaller bits of content throughout the year. So nothing seemingly as grandiose as the previous chapters, but the smaller stuff, which to me sounds a lot like the type of content that a smaller studio would be able to handle as opposed to a much larger previous one. Which is what I was getting at towards the beginning when I said that the two things that they have presented here are not mutually exclusive. You can be doing all of this, and the game can also be winding down. They have said in their update that their plan is to, of course, continue to grow, but obviously they're going to say that, unless the game just completely stops making money. They're not going to say that their plan is to shut it down in the near future, unless that has fully been set in stone at some point, which as of now it clearly hasn't, but understand eventually that if it's not making money it will get shut down, because that is how everything online ultimately goes like this. And when that is paired with these seasonal updates, which to me just seem smaller overall, even if they are intended to keep people engaged, they're clearly not the big expansions that were the standard at one point. Combine that with the fact that I sincerely doubt ESO would have been hit with all these layoffs if it was making a significant amount of money, leads me to believe that this game just might not be putting up the numbers that it once was, even if it's not insolvent or anything. So the idea of hey, let's move this to a more manageable situation while also understanding that it's not going to be this gigantic moneymaker anymore, especially as The Elder Scrolls 6 is finally underway in full. Let's keep this going until at least that releases, at which point we can reevaluate that kind of thing. I mean, obviously, I don't know exactly what their thought process is there, and that's a lot of speculation on my part, as I already said for this part of the video. My point is, all of that can be true while also saying that our goal is to continue to make this an enjoyable experience for people and keep the updates coming. It's also possible that I'm entirely wrong about the entire thing, and I fully acknowledge that. But here's the thing, and another reason I kind of wanted to make this video anyway, which is that the ultimate future for ESO is pretty much a given. You see, because regardless of what scenario there is actually true, it may well be somewhere in between. The fate of pretty much every game like this is, I would say, a slow slide into non-existence, which is another reason I don't love to play MMOs these days, because while there have certainly been a lot of them that are very long-running, another thing that happens is a lot of them get shut down. Usually as a result of money, of course. Now, it's not impossible that they might keep them online in some way just to keep the service active. And to be fair, a decade-plus long run is hardly the worst thing out there. But sooner or later, what tends to happen with every game that is fundamentally multiplayer as an experience is that sooner or later it simply ceases to be. And while there are certainly some, again, very long-running exceptions to that, it's not exactly like Bethesda at large is adverse to shutting things down if they need to, like the Elder Scrolls Blades or the Elder Scrolls Legends. And while those are obviously different in the sense that they are mobile games, they were clearly already willing to shut things down if they weren't profitable enough, and that was before, obviously, all of these layoffs and everything, pushing Xbox and Microsoft at large to focus more on things like just straight up profitability, which, again, all these changes don't exactly give a lot of confidence towards, and despite this update, is not any less true as of now. And while I could end it there, I'm going to end it on a slightly different note, because the reason I made this video isn't to reinforce that, maybe this is going to be the death knell of this game or anything, but rather that there are things I really enjoyed about ESO. That is why I wound up playing it so much, and it makes me kind of bummed out to see it in the state that it's in, because while I appreciate the very sort of MMO-focused gameplay of the thing isn't going to be for everybody when the franchise at large is still a single-player experience, I will say the stuff that I really enjoyed about ESO was their ability to take things that were not really used in the single-player games, lore-wise, for a variety of reasons, and really dig into them and kind of show off what they could be. And the single-player experience of that was still really, really good. And the single-player experience of a lot of those stories and the sort of delving into the lore of those things was an enjoyable time for me. It's why I played it so much. And while I could really care less about the MMO portion of it, there's also a lot of really cool stuff there that I think it would be sad to see get put to the torch. This doesn't look great, and I have my personal doubts that the game recovers from this. However, I will also say I'm not deeply involved in that community. I still met a lot of cool people while I played that game, and I hope for their sake and the people still playing it that some sort of equitable solution, whatever that winds up being, manages to arise from this situation. But that is pretty much all I've got for you guys today. Just kind of something I wanted to talk about, but by all means, let me know how you feel about all of it down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.